Welcome to M1 Tanker. For your general information, I would like to give you some background. Doc. Sid, Dr. Cox, is not your typical story for growing up in western North Carolina and living in a 10 by 50 foot mobile home with 2 siblings was a challenge. But in America, it can be a miracle story. Today, after overcoming many barriers, Dr. Cox has many awards and statuses, including membership in the high IQ societies of Editorial and Mensa. He holds an ND in naturopathic healing, as well as other professional accomplishments. More information on his background and expertise, as well as information on analytics concerning the failing government officials, go to m1tanker.com. Enjoy the video.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm going to be covering a subject today that has to do with the past and how the future has proven the past. If you go back into early 1920 and you run from 20 through 21, basically 2 years that the COVID has been around. There are a lot of things that were said in the beginning, a lot of people that were questioning the mainstream media, the line of thinking that was being thrown out by the government, and by all these characters that with their extreme authoritarianism syndrome decided that they're just going to mess with people and make people's lives miserable for whatever reason, and claimed that they had the authority and the science backing them in what they did. So the future will determine the outcome for them, but as it stands right now, it's interesting how so much of what they were making claims for or claims in favor of are falling apart. But the high intensity health, I'm going to put the link in the description, and I encourage you, I hope you go there and then listen to the whole thing. But in this video, he's posted 16 things. Well, the title of it says 2020 Conspiracy Theories That Turned Out to Be True. And most everybody out there, you probably know this, but the concept of conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist showed up in the 1950s, 60s. I'm not sure exactly when. It doesn't really matter, but it's part of the lingo that's used in media and by certain individuals that are manipulators in social media. It's a phrase coined probably out of the MK Ultra CIA operations, where they attack people and discredit them, even though they may have some kind of logic behind what they think. Just a simple labeling as a conspiracy theorist, or that you're talking about a conspiracy theory. It really never makes sense, but what they do is they put that label on someone, and now if you listen to them and believe what they say, then you're a tinfoil hat idiot. That's what that whole process is in calling someone a conspiracy theorist. Now, the world has been full of conspiracies. Probably the greatest known conspiracy in the world was the conspiring of the Pharisees with the apostle who took silver and then turned over the man named Jesus, who is today probably the for it is the most prominent figure in the world, in the history of the world. But there was conspiracy at that time, and Christ knew it was going to happen. He actually talked about it before it did happen. But that's conspiracy, and it's happened, to Caesar, everyone has conspirators that are conspiring against them. I mean, the average everyday person, there are people that we know that in some form or fashion conspire to either attack our character or personality and everything through gossip. That's conspiracy. Now, a conspiracy theory is when you speculate. You're speculating on whether or not there's a purpose behind things. So that's what the conspiracy theory is. When somebody has and if it may be far-fetched, and the chances of it being true may be slim, but the person that's trying to evaluate the situation a lot of times might be right. And the conspiracy turns out to be legitimate, have legitimate basis for investigation. So a lot of things start with theories. I mean, you have the Big Bang Theory, all right? Is there a conspiracy behind the Big Bang Theory? I don't know. Maybe people that are anti-Christian, they dislike the Bible and the creation story, and so maybe they come up with a Big Bang Theory to, maybe there's a conspiracy there to discredit the Bible. That may be what somebody might think, but how things began and all of that's a whole different story. But going back to this, conspiracy theories are serious. There's substance to any kind of thinking where there may be a possible outcome, and you theorized in the beginning. That's science. The science is almost always undecided, and there are a lot of questions involving even, for example, that's why they still call it a theory. When it comes to the COVID, the virus theory is just that. It's a theory. There's a lot of guesswork involved in what a virus is. They don't know what they look like. They may claim they do, but they don't really know. There's no exact means by which you can view a virus. These small 1 micron COVID virus particles are not visible under a microscope. Now, they may claim they have pictures of them, but they don't know for sure. So the theory, you have a virus theory, you have another theory, the exosome theory, where it revolves around the decaying particles from cells that die on a regular basis in the body. And the body, if your body is not clearing this waste out of your system because of issues that you have because of your health or whatever, your immune system starts becoming overworked in dealing with this decaying bacteria, or these decaying particles, and the bacteria in the body's not able to eat it up, or and your body can't get rid of it. You end up with a flu-like symptoms. What they want to call the flu virus, right? These symptoms can be because your body not being able to handle it, which brings into play vitamin D3, which is actually a hormone that's produced by the body because of being out in the sun. So, and then come back around on that when we're talking about theories. And whether there's a conspiracy or not, you can make a lot of money off of flu shots, right? But you don't make a lot of money off of vitamin D3 that keeps you from getting the flu, or keeps you from succumbing to the exosome decay. So here you have a situation where as you come back around on the theory, what you can theorize. Well, what are the motives behind most of these things? So I'm gonna go down through the list of the things that he talked about in the video. One of the things he talked about was everyone's risk of dying is the same, according to whoever they say, the media, the authorities, or whatever. Everyone's risk of dying is the same, which there were a lot of people saying that that's not possible, and so that and people that were questioning that were called conspiracy theorists, because there are literally people out there that want to believe word for word everything they're spoon-fed in the media. And they also, I think, in many cases, they look for and wish for the worst-case scenario. They revel in it. You know, they love the idea that there's some kind of traumatic thing going on, and it puts some kind of added zest to their life, a worry and fear that they didn't have before, and it kind of like, you know, maybe they get high off that. I don't know. But everybody's risk of dying is the same. Turned out to be not true. Most of the people that are young are not impacted by the COVID, yet they want to stick a needle in them. Constantly want to stick a needle in them for the purpose of selling vaccines. You know, now that's not a conspiracy theory. That's a fact. The pharmaceutical companies that are making these vaccines, they don't really care about anything but making money. That's just the nature of corporations, especially big, out-of-control corporations that have lost their purpose. They've lost their, well, in some cases, I think their whole purpose was on the side of evil to begin with, because they really, you know, they act like they're doing everything they can for us. In the meantime, they kill us, or they kill people. You know, a lot of people die and whatever, you know, they don't seem to be worried about it. Number two is nutrition and exercise have nothing to do with the virus. That's become, you know, they were telling everybody, you know, no exercise, don't go to the gym, you know, we're not worried about prevention, what you eat, nutrition, taking vitamins like vitamin D3, zinc, vitamin C. None of that was, you know, talked about. It was all about, we've got to come up with a virus, a vaccine for the virus, because the vaccine's going to end it all. It's going to end it. But as it turns out, nutrition and exercise are very, very important when it comes to avoiding avoiding the disease. All right. Number three was use cases to gauge the trajectory of the pandemic. Okay, and when he talks in here, it's really good to listen to. Cases are positive, negative COVID test. A case is developed by having a positive COVID test that they encourage everybody in the world to go get. It's like Nancy Pelosi, you know, oh, we introduced the CARES Act, it's for the families and all this kind of stuff, and that psychobabble that she does all the time. And then at the same time, at the end of it, she goes, testing. They're going to supply, they got the money, they're going to supply the tests and everything, and the most important thing is testing. So even if you didn't have, they wanted you to go test even if you didn't have any symptoms. You know, go test and make sure, you know, just see if you have it. And people were lining up in their cars, you know, like, you know, cattle lining up in their cars, bumper to bumper, waiting to get their test, you know, something stuck up their nose with chemicals on it, and that's going to tell them whether or not they have COVID. The problem with that is that he doesn't mention this in his talk, but the big problem with it is that in July, the CDC came out with, or they made the determination that the PCR test, which is the you know, the major test that they rolled out in the very beginning of all this stuff, the PCR test is producing 80% false positives, 85% false positives. Now, there's even question about that too, because they have yet to, even though there are lawsuits that have been filed against the CDC, they've yet to show any kind of documentation and of any proof that they have isolated a COVID virus. They don't have that. All they did was they went to a gene bank and decided that they were going to, they decided on, in their little conference or whatever over the internet, which gene sequence they were going to pull from a gene bank that they had from this supposed virus material that they had gathered in the past. And it's that particular thing that they pulled out. Now, it's very likely that it might not even be a flu virus. It could be just cold. You know, the thing about the PCR test is it's what triggers it. And the developer of it, Dr. Mullis, he stated in 2019 that the PCR test cannot detect the difference between a COVID or a regular coronavirus. It couldn't detect the difference. There was no way of using it to detect whether it was a COVID or whatever, or just a flu or a cold virus. And he emphasized that, and he also emphasized the fact that if you go over 28 cycles on this test, which you run it over and over and over and over as a cycle as you run it through, the more you run it, the more chance you're going to pick up some kind of particle. But he said after 28 cycles, it becomes inaccurate. When you go over 35 cycles, it's just bogus. So whatever result you get is bogus over 35. They've been running the PCR test, which can't detect COVID to begin with, but to get a positive out of it, based on this genetic material apparently, to get a positive out of it, they run the cycles over 40 times. All these tests are set up to run cycle over 40 times. The inventor of the PCR, Nobel Prize winning inventor of the PCR test, Dr. Mullis, stated specifically that anything over 35 is absolutely bogus. It means nothing. Basically false positives. So you take that in consideration, now you end up with a false positive on a COVID test, which means that they're counting deaths as COVID and then COVID related, which is the other fallacy of the thing. And people can say, "Oh, that's conspiracy theory." Well, no, it's not. It's a fact. It's an absolute fact that with COVID, you end up with with these false positives. That if someone tests positive and they're counting these deaths, I mean, it's happened more than once. In states and places all over the country, a person dies of a gunshot wound, and they bring them into the hospital. They're still alive. Well, they're testing them for COVID. They're running these tests on them, and if they get a positive, now they write them up as having a positive COVID, and they call it a COVID-related death. All right, so, and there are nurses that have done videos, and they've shown in some hospitals they were testing people, and they kept getting negatives and negatives and negatives, and then they changed their chart and just said they put positive, even though they didn't have a negative test. And these people are on ventilators, probably going to die because of the CDC's recommended treatments for COVID, which is that's a whole other questionable action on their part. But as far as the renal failure and other complications that are induced by doing some of these things that they did to the patient. So all of this stuff, though, all they're doing, they were trying to drive up the death numbers. So if you have 80% of the PCR tests out there testing positive falsely, how many of the people that died had false positives on the PCR test that was given to them? Which means that a large number, 80% potentially, 80% of the people that supposedly died of COVID related actually didn't even have COVID. Another part of that is if you take away all those deaths, you can go back and look at what was considered to be inappropriate use of approved medications to treat COVID, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Another thing that he talks about when they were saying, this COVID thing is right on us, we don't have time to get healthy, which was a major deal, because they told everybody they couldn't go to the gym, couldn't exercise, you couldn't get outside, which, by the way, drives down the vitamin D levels in the body, because it's interesting. Like for example, dogs, their bodies produce vitamin C. It's something that their bodies produce, and so they don't have to worry about eating oranges and whatever, finding sources of vitamin C, drinking lemonade and all this. They don't have to do that. But a human being has to have it's considered an essential nutrient, which means that it's something you have to acquire, and you can't survive without it. Vitamin C, you end up sick if you don't get enough vitamin C. So another thing about the vitamin D3 is it's for humans, it's produced in the body, and it's exposure to sunlight on our skin. And for seems like a long time ago, they told us, the sun is going to kill you. It causes cancer. The sun will kill you, so you don't want to be out in the sun. So you cover up, you slather on all of this sunblock and everything, and in the process of doing that, you kill your vitamin D3 levels. If a person is Hispanic, or especially of African descent, with dark complexion, anyone in the darker the complexion, it's more of an issue. The vitamin D3 levels amongst the black population in the United States, or the dark brown population, but primarily in the African American group, that group has probably 78% or something like that of that group is deficient in vitamin D3, which is one reason that they're so susceptible to this COVID thing. And see the reason that and there's the correlation between vitamin D3 and winter and summertime. When is flu season? It's in the wintertime. Do you get sun in the wintertime? No. Everybody heads indoors because it's too cold outside. They're bundled up, they cover up and everything. They don't get much sun. Vitamin D levels drop. And then for the exosome or the virus theory, whichever one you would talk about, it takes hold in the body. Right. So another one that he talked about, all masks are equally effective. If you don't know about that one, I can't help you, because the 1 micron virus, nothing stops it. That's why all these lockdown and everything, none of the stuff has worked. If that's the case, if it's floating in the air and it's being passed, as they say, through the air, then you're going to have a hazmat level of air filtration in order for it to work. And considering the fact that only high-risk people that have bad health conditions, whether it's diabetes, obesity, heart disease, these kinds of things, they're the ones that are at risk of dying. And COVID itself is there's going to be some underlying issue as far as your immunity, and there's something going on due to smoking, and I think in some cases we're talking about vaping or whatever would have an impact. But you can't believe half of the stuff that you hear in the media. So I haven't read anything official about vaping. But if you're doing those kinds of things, then you're going to have issues when it comes to COVID, directly from COVID. But then you'd have issues if it was a regular flu too. People die during the flu season all the time. And if you extrapolate the 80% false positives out of all the numbers and stuff, you would pretty much come down to basic, bad flu season. 'Cause sometimes the flu is worse some years than it is others as far as people dying as a result of the flu. And then the media fear mongering has been going on from the day one with this stuff. Especially in running up the case numbers and making a big deal out of the case numbers, when morbidity or death numbers are what you have to pay attention to. As it stands right now, because of everything that's been going on, as far as people, learning that they should take vitamin D and things like that, the death numbers even for those people has gone down. And the only thing they can do, well, if you think about it, the only way they can keep this pandemic going is having PCR tests coming back positive all the time, or having their new COVID tests that they're supposed to be coming out with. Maybe that's why we have such a high case number in the United States, that we're going to roll out a new test. And of course, it was like Bill Gates and George Soros were throwing their money into that. They bought the controlling interest of the company that was going to make this new test that's supposed to be able to differentiate between the regular flu. I mean, that's exactly what they said at CDC. Can differentiate between the flu and the COVID. Well, if we couldn't do that before, then what are we talking about? Was it? How did you know it was COVID if you couldn't differentiate? So the new test is supposed to be able to do that, according to what they say. So if they've rolled out this new test, maybe that's why we have all these massive numbers, like a million cases in the United States, a million a day, or a million. I don't even really pay much attention to it, because it has less meaning to me than ever. The indirect effects of the virus on young people are less harmful than the direct effects of the virus. Now that's a it's kind of hard to grasp what he's saying there, but the indirect effect of the virus on young people has to do with masking, has to do with their being kept at home, that kind of thing, and it's what they've done, because the young kids are not dying of COVID. It's like 99.999% chance that you're going to survive if you get COVID if you're a child. That's up to at least to 12 years of age, or probably up to from a baby up to 18. I don't know the exact age range in there, but the younger you are, this thing doesn't do anything to you. But young people have very strong immune systems too. The virus is going to be eradicated, just like smallpox and polio. I don't know how many people heard, listened in on those kind of things that they've talked about in the past. But smallpox and polio are a good deal different, and especially if you research the exosome aspect of this kind of thing, like I said, you can stop the exosome process with vitamin D3, and apparently it works well in dealing with COVID. But anyway, it's a whole thing to investigate. But smallpox and polio are different in the sense that apparently the most of what you're dealing with when it comes to those two is of flu virus is like, common, and it mutates. You've never heard of mutation of smallpox or mutation of polio. So promoting healthy living causes vaccine hesitancy. They like to think that if you tell everybody if you eat properly and you take some nutritional support and you exercise and everything, you don't need a vaccine. That people are going to go get the vaccine if they think that it's going to be worthwhile. Personally, I think it's very strange that after three jabs and you can still get the COVID. It doesn't sound like the traditional vaccine, and that's one reason that probably, and a lot of people maybe don't even know this, the CDC changed the definition of a vaccine just to make this fit into their scenario. So you tell me the motivation behind that. People in the hospital are there because they have the Rona. Most of the people end up in the hospital, like we said before, they have some kind of other problem. And when they get into the hospital because of their heart disease issues or their blood pressure or their diabetes, their obesity, there all kinds of infectious type things that can happen. Maybe they're developing a sepsis or whatever. They end up in the hospital, and they do their little. They've been doing their PCR test on them, and 80% of them are, they get a positive result, or who knows what. Anyway, I mean, I can't pull up their tests and re-examine them, but I don't know what you would re-examine them with anyway if it's only 20% accurate. And then they closed the fitness centers and the gyms, and that was supposed to help flatten the curve. Of course, nothing's flattened the curve. It's going through the roof now with the positive test. So, so much for the curve, right? It's going flat up. It's not, horizontal. It's flat up. So I won't even get into that, the idiocy of closing. I mean, you can go to McDonald's and eat. You can go to a restaurant, take your mask off and eat, but you can't go to the gym. And then closing schools is, that's a real good idea. No, it's and they did the remote learning, and the impact on performance in education is a tanking of a program. The kids are basically a year behind at least in their education level, their reading skills, their math skills, and everything, because remote learning is not the same thing as homeschooling, and that's a point that I would like to strongly make. It is not the same thing, because it's a different process when it comes to homeschooling, the way that the parents go about doing it and teaching and putting the kids through the routine of education, compared to the great comparison that he shows is the number of people that contract the virus compared to the places where they have lockdowns, and then places like Miami and Florida, large population area, that they haven't been doing lockdowns, and a variety of other different comparisons that he makes in there. What's really crazy is how this media operation continues to push an agenda, and that agenda is that we're in the middle of a deadly pandemic, and it's very apparent that we're in the middle of a numbers manipulation to create a pandemic, or the image of a pandemic. And so as more information comes out and people are starting to wake up to this kind of thing, if they don't vote some of these characters out, just get rid of them, and just kick these tyrants out of the states. So, and maybe banish them to the desert someplace, so they can suffer without sitting in their governor's mansions or wherever they're living. But it's really pathetic. It's just really pathetic that they do all these lockdowns, and they don't take in consideration the impact it has on the average small guy. They don't care, and it's not that they don't realize it. They know what they're doing. They just don't care. To me, it looks like a concerted effort, and I don't consider this to be a conspiracy theory. I just look at the facts. It looks like it's a concerted effort to destroy a part of our economy, primarily middle class, the kind of hardworking blue-collar individuals, or even not even all blue-collar. If they're depending on, it's basically a segment of the population that's very important. They provide an enormous amount of jobs, but it's as if they're trying to create a situation where people are going to be forced to depend on government just to have money to pay the rent or buy their food. They're going to give them some kind of payout because there's not going to be any jobs. They won't have any jobs, so they're going to be forced to live off of the government. And the more dependent you are on the government, the less free you are, the less you can speak up. And then the last thing he talked about is voter ID being racist, but a vaccine passport is equitable. So you can force people to get a vaccine, force people to have a vaccine passport. But when you show your vaccine passport, I don't know if you know this, but if you go someplace to eat, or if you go to the grocery store, or any place like that, you have to show that's what they're moving toward. Force you to get a vaccine in order for you to just go even buy food to eat. And that you're forced to show this vaccine passport along with an ID, because the vaccine passport doesn't have your picture on it. It's issued by the medical authorities or whatever. Now you got to throw out your driver's license or your state ID or some kind of identification to verify that that's you and that passport is legitimate. So anyway, I guess bottom line, big question. I know what the answer is, but the big question out there: how do you create a fake pandemic when few people are actually dying from COVID due to the false positives that are added to pre-existing morbidities? Is the cause of death a PCR test? Maybe that would be more accurate. Most of the deaths were caused by the PCR tests. If they were caused by COVID and 80% of the tests were false positives, it must have been the PCR tests that killed them, not the COVID. So anyway, a lot to think about, and I really encourage you to go listen to his video. It's quite informative, and they do a lot of good work. So head on over there. I'll show a few little clips in here if I get a chance to cut it up and splice it together. Thanks. Bye.